So from the removal of identity-based holidays, everything from Black History Month to Holocaust Remembrance Day and even Pride Month on Google's calendar, to other major corporations axing their diversity, equality and inclusion programs, corporate America is twerking for Donald Trump. Walmart, Meta, Amazon and many others have already joined the retreat, ending many of their pledges and programs around diversity and inclusion. But it gets worse. The 47th president wants to make American companies great again. So he's reversed a 1977 law banning the bribery of foreign officials. So no more penalties or jail time. So for example, the consulting firm, American, Bain & Co., that helped gut SARS under Jacob Moyane and under Jacob Zuma and Tom Moyane would not only get away with it scot-free today, they're almost encouraged to do it. Have a listen.
It means that if an American goes over to a foreign country and starts doing business over there, legally, legitimately, or otherwise, it's almost a guaranteed investigation, indictment, and nobody wants to do business with the Americans because of it. Nobody wants to do business. They say, look, we can deal with China. They can do whatever they want. We can deal with Russia. We can deal with anybody. And we have a normal life. You deal with America, the FBI gets over there. Nobody wants to do business because they don't want to feel like every time they pick up a phone, they're going to jail. So we'll sign this, and it takes courage to sign it because you only get bad publicity when you sign.
So how flexible are corporate ethics in the face of political power? We're joined now by a special guest, Dr. Thelela Ngcetane-Vika, who is a lecturer at Wits School of Governance, specializing in corporate governance. A very good morning to you, and thank you for your time. Welcome to 702 Breakfast.
Good morning, Bongani and the 702 listeners. I'm so delighted to have joined the show this morning.
Right, let's start with a quote from an American academic. His name is Professor Timothy Snyder. He published a book in 2017, and it's called On Tyranny. And it's got a great chapter in which he calls it Do Not Obey in Advance. And here's the quote. He says, most of the power of authoritarianism is freely given. In times like this, individuals think ahead about what a repressive government will want, and they offer themselves without being asked. Isn't that what is happening in America right now, Doctor?
It would seem, Bongani, and what we are learning with the Trump era, especially the 2.0, as you rightly stated earlier on, is that corporate ethics can be fragile. And what do I mean by that? The vulnerability of corporate ethics is a reality influenced by who is in power at that particular point in time. And it shouldn't be, but it's a reality. And I'll give you reasons why companies sometimes seem to be, moving back and forth, as you have highlighted, your Meta, your Walmart, your Target, amongst others. So corporate America is in turmoil. But once corporate America is in turmoil, I can tell you the global corporate ethics are also going to be in turmoil.
Snyder says in his book that a citizen who complies in this way, in a sense, is teaching power what it can do. I remember the pledges that were made by American CEOs in the aftermath of the George Floyd protests, for example, right? They said they were going to fight racism, and here they are, so very quickly reversing all those pledges. But is it a principle then, if it bends with every blowing wind?
Well, it should be ideally, but the reality is that if you observe corporate America, it would seem there are three responses in every political administration. And I'll come back to the George Floyd matter, and you're correctly quoting it. One, it's survival. Number two, it's pushback. And often the last one is silence. They respond often in those three ways. Survival, well, we need to navigate ourselves during this particular administration and its policies. And boy, during the Trump one, with the many executive orders, they are doing exactly that. Of course, not all of them. Then there's a particular pushback you are seeing on other companies like your JP Morgan, amongst others, who are saying we are going to stick with our values and our culture, and we're not going to be reversing any DI policies or programs. And then there's also another reaction of silence, whether quietly complying to the executive orders or quietly continuing with the DI programs. So you're getting that. But ordinarily, corporate ethics shouldn't be influenced by politics. But there's also reality of business. You see, Bongani and the 702 listeners, some of them are doing business with the federal, they've got federal contracts, some companies. And the fear is real that they may not get those contracts. And what do? They try to survive. So what we are learning, corporate ethics can be very fragile. And with a strong president like Donald Trump who does things, I mean, he wakes up and he decides, I'm doing this. And then you see the pressure of companies falling into that.
They go along to get along. I mean, I love these: survival, pushback, and silence. We've seen this shift in corporate values here in our own country under state capture. I mean, the parallels between Trump 2.0 and state capture under Zuma are quite striking.
Yes. And what we saw, I mean, with and even before the state capture, if you see the Nuremberg Nuggets Commission and the findings from there, you were making the example about the Bain and Company. It flows from there, and then there were confirmation from the Zondo Commission. But what we're also seeing, as I was just thinking about this yesterday, whether the fine is enough in the case of Bain and Company, and the fine then restores sort of your corporate value and image, and you re-earn the public trust. Is that enough? And the Zondo Commission finding that, of course, the failures of law enforcement, in my view, exacerbate this, because you've got all the reports from the Zondo Commission, and then what?
But here's the thing. I mean, even if the NPA doesn't prosecute or didn't prosecute the culprits of state capture, one was always confident that at least for international companies, right, they would be nabbed within their jurisdictions. We trusted the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission, for example, or the FBI to go after McKinsey and all these other companies. Trump's argument now, though, is that, no, we've got to give American companies the advantage because everyone else is doing it. You know, if China and India did it, why can't we did it?
Absolutely. And when they say when an American president sneezes, we all catch some proverbial flu, and we're catching it. And then the anti-bribery conventions that initially seem to have prohibiting paying of bribes abroad, they're going to see a really, really pushback, I can tell you. And because Trump sees things from a very business perspective, the lens of Trump is business. We should be all doing business. And if it means that sometimes we break some laws in the process of doing that, why not? So it's going to be that era, and it's going to be very interesting.
How do you justify it, though? Because why is domestic bribery, paying off officials in your own country, bad, but it's great to do so abroad?
It goes back to the question of that fragility of the corporate ethics. I understand within the jurisdiction that I'm in, they're very stricter with the law, so I'll comply. But if there's an opportunity for me somewhere working for, I'm a multinational corporation, I can get away with proverbial matter in another jurisdiction, why not? That's what you're dealing with. This is why consistency of corporate ethics really from the top, from presidents' offices becomes important, because what presidents say matters. And if the case of Bain, if you know, last year President Ramaphosa was really, making that statement that they shouldn't, some companies here at home, they shouldn't be using Bain and Co., especially for the B20 amongst others. And that's the point that we should be saying. But not only saying, but we must also walk the talk.
Yeah.
Consequence management is a problem, Bongani, for corporations here and in many places. So we are there. And it's really going to be a turmoil of some kind.
What is the danger of all of this? I mean, if the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act falls away in the US, what's the danger for multinationals? And what will it mean for the likes of McKinsey and Bain and Co.?
That you can get away. You're sending a message that, corporate scandals like your Enron in the past, your Barings Bank in the United Kingdom, amongst others, you can get away with the proverbial murder. Maybe a fine is enough, and then you can come back with a bang. That's the message that's being sent. But also in the United States, what's happening now, there's a rise in litigations, if you notice, because what other option other companies have at their disposal when you have to have a pushback against a powerful force like a president? So there's a rise in litigations, but the implications of litigations, often they are long, they take forever. What do you do
and they take
now?
money.
And money. And what do you do now, currently? What does that mean? But what it tells us, Bongani and the 702 listeners, that the reality is that fragility. And that fragility then gives a very chaotic corporate environment, not only corporate America, but corporate South Africa, corporate other jurisdictions. So that's what is going to happen.
Is this capitalism's ultimate victory?
Others are arguing that. I'm saying it's still early days. Let's see and watch. And I'm hoping that those who've got money, especially civil society and, of course, some bodies, they can really litigate at a very aggressive pace, because we need to do that.
We've spoken in recent years about ethical consumers. Can the public fight back?
They can, but public also depend on resources. Do they have resources? Because
no, we can simply boycott some of these companies, not buy their products.
Yes, that's what is happening in the United States. They are boycotting some, but there isn't much appetite, it would seem, yet to do the boycotting. I was in the United States recently. I've just returned, and I was sitting in some conversations that there were, some of these discussions. There's a really polarized political environment in the United States. Some would want to boycott, but some feel like, look, we were unhappy, for instance, with the DI, so it's the time to fix it. So you're getting that polarized environment. Whether then boycotts can be effective or not, we shall have to wait and see. But that's another avenue. Of course, litigations is still an avenue at their disposal too.
Pretty. I appreciate your time, Dr. Thelela Ngcetane-Vika, a lecturer at Wits School of Governance. She specializes in corporate governance. We saw this under fascism in the 1930s. You know what they say about those who don't learn from history? They're doomed to repeat it.
Current events, developing stories,
tough questions,
your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.